Oh, well.
You know, a lot of people get to that point. They just
kind of burn out, maybe?
Well, you get burned out, and I'm burned out on some of these groups I'm in, and every time I go to a board meeting, I think, I'm resigning, you know. But then I don't. I get bored at board meetings, let's put it that way.
Okay.
And it's like when you're a volunteer, people expect a lot from you, and you have to remember to be gentle with your volunteers or you run them off.
Oh, yes.
And I've just got a thick hide, I guess, so I stay, and I know that the leader will change in a year or two.
And I found, too, if somebody will do the work, they'll let you stay.
They'll let you stay, but they take you for granted.
Yeah,
well, you know how that is.
Okay, this brings our interview to close because Barbara Youngblood Carr will present so much more in just a moment. And you are in for a wonderful treat. I just know you're going to love her stuff. That's what we poets sometimes call our stuff.
We call it stuff.
We call it stuff.
You know, my reputation precedes me when I go places like Longview or Houston or somewhere, and they say, we know we're going to love your stuff. You're so funny. So that kind of puts a damper on reading something serious.
Yeah, well, it does, but she writes some really good, serious stuff, too.
I always start with that and end up with humor, so you leave in a good mood. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being our guest on Poets and Poetry, and we hope that you will join us now as we go to the meeting of the Texoma Poetry Society.
I'm very lucky to have been funded by the City of Austin Arts Commission for 5 of my Ancestor Series books. 4 of them are here, and I have one I have to have finished by the end of September due to constraints on the contract, because there's always a lot of red tape, and it will be called Following in Ancestral Footsteps. So one of the things I've done for that one is go back to some places where I was in my youth and have pictures from then with pictures now. Like in Oklahoma, I hunted up the world's largest totem pole a couple of weeks ago, where I was as a child with my family. When I was a teenager and from 8 years up, my dad used to drag us into Oklahoma, where he grew up in a valley called Peavine Hollow. He took us back there on every 3-day vacation and weekend to hunt Indian artifacts and get in touch with his roots. Now, when you're from like 10 to 13, you don't like to do things with your parents. And I really hated that a lot. But as I grew older, those became to be times about which I write my strongest poetry. And it's a place that I need to go back to every year or two to touch base, put my feet in the river. We're going there after we leave here tomorrow for about a week. It just does things for me. It's my foxhole. I didn't get to go there all the time we moved around in the military except one time. My parents are buried together there. They died in a car wreck together 37 years ago. I've been an orphan for a long time. So I would like to read a piece that tells you why I love that place so much, if that's okay with you. It's called Sitting on the Illinois Riverbank near Tahlequah, Oklahoma, Remembering. This place, this one place, knits a large part of my whole cloth together with one giant tapestry. How I love it here, sitting near this clear, rock-bottomed river and wading into its chilly edges where gentle waves refresh my aching body with its healing, sacred waters. I can close my eyes anywhere in the world and visualize sunlight dappling off its shimmering eddies, hear its soft lapping noises sifting over skirted tree roots and fallen tree limbs, its rushing rapids barreling over stone fortresses. River murmurs sing songs of comfort, strength, and remembrance as they stretch beneath bluffs along the winding road across from Mollyfield Cemetery. All life's threads lead me here, weave my patterns together into this ancestral blanket begun by my ancestors. They sat on this same shady riverbank, fished, chatted, or napped as my daughter and I do today. I hear the voices of my ancestors whispering to me in the wind, welcoming me home. Thank you. That's just the way I feel about that place. I'm going to be on some poetry CD in Austin, and out of all the things I read for about 2 hours, the man said he was going to put this one on there, of course, without any music. I often sing with my poetry, but I don't put the music in my books. I don't want to fool with the copywriting materials, so they can come and get me if they can catch me at places like this. But I am a musician, and I play the piano anywhere I can get a nickel for doing it, and a lot of places where I don't get any money, like retirement homes. When I go to retirement homes in Austin, I call it an evening of music and poetry, because one of our infamous poets in Austin said the word poetry can clear a room faster than the word fire. So the people do really like the music, and I always put it around the season of the year, like St. Patrick's Day or Christmas music. That makes it easy. When I go there in June, I'll be doing Cool Water. Does anybody remember that song? Because it's so hot, and I like to yodel with that song, so that'll be a good one, and it's already hot enough. So this piece is called I Heard My Poem Singing. I heard my poem singing. I will arise and go to Jesus. He will embrace me in his arms, in the arms of my dear Savior. Oh, there are 10,000 charms. I heard my poem singing. Its clear, metaphorical notes hung near the ceiling in a downtown Austin, Texas church. The melody crescendoed higher, stopped near the top of a giant man-made wooden cross. It hovered there silently for a few moments in the colored lights of sun-drenched, stained glass windows, then gently floated downward. I heard my poem singing. Its wings brushed my hand with restless chords before it continued on its journey through my heart and spirit. It reminded me to remember the eloquent hymn singing my grandfather, George Washington Youngblood, led his congregation in singing so long ago from his square note hymn book near Tahlequah, Oklahoma, land of my ancestors. My grandfather led hymns like Shall We Gather at the River and Softly and Tenderly, and some of the older hymns like Oh, come, angel band, come and around me stand. Oh, bear me away on your snow white wings to my immortal home. Bear me away on your snow white wings to my immortal home. My poem watched me as it sang, was not satisfied until its harmonies blossomed through my fingers on clear white paper. When I listened to my poem singing, I knew beyond any doubt that peaceful understanding in life that is born when a poem or a beautiful song sings through it. Thank you. And I always have a lot of archival photographs in my book. So this is a picture of my grandfather's choir, way back when he was a young, good-looking man. And my daddy is sitting at his feet. He was about 5 years old then. My aunt was about 8. She has big bows in her hair. And my grandmother died when my grandfather was 26 years old. He never remarried. He said he was a one-woman man. And that was the end of that. Now, lately, I've been in a nostalgic mood about my grandfather. I guess he was more important in my life than I realized at the time, although I have written about him a lot in my books. The other day I was inspired to write this piece, which will be in my new book in the fall, Walking Back Through Time. I remember when I was 8 years old, my grandfather, George Washington Youngblood, knew everything. There was no question I asked that he could not answer. He pointed out Texas wildflowers, knew the names for them all. He let me pick bouquets to take home to my mama. How I looked forward to his visits. I always walked taller when he held my hand. His keen vision told me when to step around a tarantula, a copperhead snake hiding in dead leaves, or a large red ant bed along our path, so his hard-soled shoes wouldn't steal the lives of the creatures, and so they couldn't bite my tiny feet through my open-toed sandals. During my teen years, Grandfather's calm presence and soft, unpreachy counsel poured balm over my suffering life. And although I was no longer 8 years old, I found I loved him more than ever. I listened when he spoke, trusted him when he held my hand, and felt totally secure when he said everything would be okay. Whenever life gets tough now that I'm older myself, I dream dance back through time to that year when I was 8 years old again, holding my grandfather's hand. Good grief. We are walking down our old familiar path, watching squirrels, rabbits, and occasional deer, beautiful butterflies and other insects scurry along our journey, listening to birdsong, and I am picking Texas wildflower bouquets to take home to my mama. Well, I won't be reading that one again for a while. Ooh, that's the first time I've done that. But memories can be very powerful. Last year, when Kathy and I went up into Oklahoma and stayed on Lake Tenkiller for about 10 days, I had a good friend who lived there in a little cabin out on close to the lake. Her name was Diane Brandmiller. She was a PhD who worked in the prison system in Muskogee. And of all things, she did anger management counseling for those big bad convicts that were in the men's prison. And she was a little skinny thing. And I wondered. But she got burned out on that and didn't renew her contract this January and has now moved to Fayetteville, Arkansas to own her own psychiatric business, I believe. While we were in her house, my daughter's friend went with us. And she said, "I've never been bitten by a chigger." Well, while we were there, she got, one day after we were there about 3 days, Kathy and I got chewed up with them right away. They really love me. They camp out behind your knees. I did some study on chiggers after I got home, and I didn't know they mostly go behind your knees and make little pyramids. That's where they like to get. Well, your knees and then anywhere there's something tight, like the top of your socks or your belt. But ticks like to crawl up your whole body and mostly get on your neck. I didn't know that either until last year, but I was the only one there that got a tick, and it was right here on my drinking blood, you know. And so my daughter tweezed it off, or they took it off. But after I got home, I was sick, and I kind of had an infected tick bite, and my doctor gave me antibiotics just to be safe because I have too much stuff wrong with me already. While we were in Diane's cabin, and there's a picture of me and Artha, I guess, or Kathy, standing on the porch at her cabin, which she has now sold. I would love to have that. We got a lot of sugar bites. Anyway, the other person, after 3 days, said, "What are these big red itchy things on my stomach?" I said, "Well, Oklahoma chiggers like you just fine." But last year they were having an epidemic of ticks, chiggers, and copperhead snakes. They had already had several bites in June, and they had to medevac people out to Tulsa for the anti-venom for the snake bites, but none of them died. So this is a poem I wrote in Diane's cabin, and maybe you can identify with some of this. Where there is life in every breath. Last night in the wild woods behind Diane's cabin near Lake Tenkiller, an owl performed its solo opera. Coyotes yipped greetings to each other and us as they trotted by near our cabin in the edges of the trees. Today at mid-morning, 2 deer leapt through tall grass at the back of the yard in clear view through the patio doors. On the front porch, in the corner under the eaves, a second set of birds is nesting and raising a family. They let the previous tenant do all the nest building work. Diane's dog survivor of a gunshot wound, never barks. She found him when he had been shot and took him to the vet about 2 years ago. Path, or Pathfinder, lays on his bed mat most of the time. Because of his trauma, he's ultra shy, is afraid during thunderstorms, and doesn't like me taking flash photos near him with it to find his wild side. But he returned home and crawled back onto his bed mat, perchance to dream about running with the wild things. Although they look peaceful, the grasses, wildflowers, and trees surrounding Diane's cabin are not at rest. They are rife with nasty, biting things. Chiggers, ticks, and poison ivy wait for innocents like us to walk by to feed their dark needs. Itch and spread. We bitch, scratch, and whine like babies because we're uncomfortable. But we also understand they are a part of this beautiful, green, countryside living in the woods lifestyle. When we return to our city lives, our country bites will heal, maybe leave tiny scars for a short while. But as time passes, we will remember our all too short visit with Diane in her cabin, where we experienced the peaceful, quiet place where there is life in every breath. Thank you. Meaning even those little biting thingy-do-talkies, you know. I thought I had sugar bites where I didn't have any. I'll do a little humor in a minute. I've done the one where I love the area. I've done the where I cried about my grandpa. I've done, anyway. And also the springtime is hard for me because it was when my first fiance died. I don't like the spring a lot sometimes. And my parents died in a car wreck together. And my husband was wounded in Vietnam right before he came home from the war in the springtime. So for me, spring is just kind of an uncomfortable about those things sometimes. I'll talk a minute and read 2 short things about one of the reasons that I was appointed the National Poet Laureate for the Purple Heart. They screened a lot of my patriotic, flag-waving, pro-military American stuff before they gave me the certificate that the president nominated me for. And one of the pieces that I wrote that they liked that has won award, the cemetery in France in Omaha Beach. And it's a short piece, and I'll read that. The title is almost as long as the poem. Reflections in a Veteran's Cemetery Far from Home, a poem for those who stayed in France near Omaha. Long, even rows, so cold, so straight, so white. We know the cost of every stone. Some soldier paid the price. For love of country gave his all, took on death's cold embrace. Some died for duty, others love. Their spirits fill this place. Although their stones sit in the sun, they still are cold and stark. Because they gave their lives their all in this strange foreign land, we live free now, thank God in them, to be American. Thank you. That was one. And then this year when we had the George Washington banquet, they have every year in a fancy club in Austin, because George Washington, of course, initiated the first meritorious service medal for wounded soldiers. Actually, he did it for all soldiers, I guess. But in 1930, that you see soldiers wear today. And this was one I wrote. My husband told me to be careful when I read this at the dinner because they're all very sensitive about their personal battles. So I like places like the Bridge Over the River Kwai, but living with this military veteran, he critiques my stuff. That was not a battle. Well, they had to battle to stay alive, you know, so I have my poetic way of looking at things, and 300 Years' War wasn't, it was a 30 Years' War. And I had already published it in 2 books. But most people, maybe this guy here would know, but most people don't know the difference. So, and I wrote 3 new things for the dinner, and I also did another one because we had 5 Purple Heart veterans to die within 10 days' time in April. And there were a lot of ceremonies. Well, 3 men and 2 women, but the women are Military Order of the Ladies Purple Heart. Actually, La Mop sounds like somebody who cleans house, but that's the initials, Ladies Auxiliary of the Military Order of the Purple Heart. So I don't like to be called a La Mop. No. Anyway, so I say the whole thing out. But I did read this poem about saluting America's military veterans. It's short. And after the dinner, this man of some repute, so it was like my husband said, they're all sensitive about their part of World War II. so in it, and changed it, and actually it flows a little better than what I had, because he pointed out to me that there were more military soldiers there than at Iwo Jima, et cetera, et cetera. We who are in your debt, we who are in your debt, salute America's military veterans. Korea, all those war zone soldiers gave their service, lives, and more. Though battles raged around them there and weapons brought some death, they served their chosen country, ours, until their final breaths. Afghanistan, Kuwait, the bloody beaches of D-Day, in Okinawa, Germany, and France, all far away from safety home, America, their loved ones left back there. Our veterans spent their days and nights where danger filled the air. In battle fire, they did not think of color, race, or creed, for they all knew wounded soldiers all spill red blood when they bleed. Let's sing old songs for veterans who kept us safe and free, the ones who sacrificed their lives and all that they might be. Let's sing new songs for veterans whose service keeps us free, allowing us to live our dreams and be who we would be. So that's an example of how I got appointed the title, because I'm always waving my flag. Okay, I'm going to end up with one more serious piece and a couple funny things. How long have I got? 30 minutes? Ew. 10, 20? That's good. I can do a lot in 20 minutes. We lived in Germany twice, 3 years each time, so a total of 6 years in Germany. One of my favorite movies is called The Legend of 1900. You won't see it all the time. It's about a man who was born on a ship, and his European mother left him in a lemon crate and left the boat when she got to America. It's a true story. And so one of the colored men who worked on the boat found the lemon crate, because he always went around after all the rich people got off the boat looking for something they dropped, a watch, a cigar, $1, you know, something left over, some change. And he found this baby in this lemon box, and the box said TD Lemons. That was the name of the company. So the other engineers down in the hold where the ship, they ran the engine room. What are you going to call this baby? TD Lemons is not a good name. Well, he was born in 1900. That's right, we'll call him 1900. So that was kind of his name. And he grew up on the ship. He never really left the ship. It's not the same as a man with no country. It's just, he started to leave the boat a couple of times when he got older, but he just really didn't want to. He'd go down the ramp and then turn around and go back, because he had all this sound equipment to talk to anywhere in America he wanted to on the ham radio. So he knew all about New Orleans, and he knew about New York City, and he didn't really have to go live there. Anyway, when he was a little boy, he watched all the people dancing in the fancy ballroom, and he saw the piano player and the band and the playing jazz music, and he learned to play the piano on his own. And he wrote some original songs when he was quite small with his legs hanging off the bench. And he became famous as one of the best jazz pianists ever. And Jelly Roll Martin took his entourage on that ship one time to have a competition with him to see. We'll just see, I invented jazz, you know. So he went on the boat, and so they had their competition. And in the movie, it's probably, but first Jelly Roll would play a song, and then this guy would play a song, and he just kind of repeated what that guy did by ear without doing anything different. And then at the end, he got up and showed out his true colors, and he played such fast and good jazz. He had laid a cigarette on the smoke, so he took a cigarette and he laid it there. And after he quit playing, he touched to the strings and it caught on fire. And that's supposed to be true. He said, I don't know how to smoke, you finish this. Or I don't know how, you finish this. Because that was a play on words. You know, I don't know how to do jazz, only you do. So here, you smoke the cigarette. But watching that movie, when I saw the beginning of it, inspired me to write this poem called Memories of the Longest Goodbye. Because I remembered how I felt when I saw that movie the first time I left at midnight on a German ocean liner to go over to Europe. My husband was already there. So I was traveling with our first son. His picture's right there. Used to, you had to have your passport picture made with your baby in your lap. Now they do them separate. They don't let you hold your children. But he was 6 weeks old, so I had to hold his head up. So we traveled over to Germany when he was a little baby. Memories of the longest goodbye. She stands in a thick pool of fog.